Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Haws, and today we're going to be talking about the potential of a supercycle. What would a supercycle even look like? What is a supercycle? And what indicators do we have that shows that this bull market could fundamentally be dramatically different than any other bull market that we've seen before? Before we get into it, if you like this content, please give me a like. I really appreciate it. Also, if you want to see more crypto content, make sure to drop a subscribe. It really helps out. Share these videos out. All right, everyone, let's get into it. First, I wanted to go over some market indicators, some key indicators that might help us both judge where we are in the crypto market and where we're going, and potentially where we could go in the long term. So first, we're going to be looking at the Bitcoin market value to realized value chart. So this is a good chart to recognize or to be able to at least sort of identify peaks in market cycles. Typically, when it's the highest, that means it's probably closer to the peak or the top of the market. And when it's at the bottom, it's probably more the oversold. So you see both market peaks here in 2013 hit above 5, so 5.6, and then again 5.9. And then in 2017, we saw a similar market peak, 4.7. We can understand that as we go, as more money comes into the system, more value in the system, we're going to see less dramatic pumps and then less dramatic dumps. So that's to be expected to see a lower ratio in 2017. Now here you can see that we haven't even broke the 4 mark. So we're not quite at that point, but if you look back at 2017, we're not far off from where 2017 was. The interesting thing about that is we're not currently at our peak, and we've seen a dramatic drop off, even though we've seen a consolidation within the chart. Obviously, there has been a little bit of a dip, but not dramatically showing this market value. So I do think right now the market value has dipped because we're recognizing that right now Bitcoin is a little undervalued. But in the grand scheme of things, we're way above the 1 indicator. So undervalued and overvalued could be subjective in this case. But right now our value is at 2.5 and Bitcoin is above 57K. So next is a chart that we've looked at before. We saw this on TradingView. So this is the full chart to kind of go over what happened back in previous bull markets. So here is the 2-year moving average multiplier. And we see every time it's hit above the red line and gone up into this peak, that's where we would say that it's more the euphoric selling point. That's the market peak, or we're getting close to the market peak at least. So you can see that here, you can see that down here, here. So back in 2013, and then again in 2017. The interesting thing is when you look at 2017, and we brought this up in the other video, when you look at 2017, you can see that it repeatedly bounced off that moving average there. And you can see that we've done pretty much the same thing, but we haven't gone over that. Now, I would like to mention, and it's very, very important when you're looking at these charts, I'm referencing a lot of this information from what's happened in previous bull runs. But that's not to say that the things that happened in 2017 or 2013 couldn't happen in a different way or not at all. Really, all the cards are on the table. My strategy has been to follow the market cycles and to follow what we know. But the reality is this asset class is super new, and really, we have no idea what 2021 is going to look like. Next, I wanted to go into some mining charts. So to discuss more of what the miners are doing for Bitcoin, this has always been a critical thing that's happened with the price of Bitcoin. A lot of times when Bitcoin goes up to a good level, we'll get some miner resistance where miners will dump their bags. So this is to identify the profit margin, or the value that they would get basically for mining, whether or not it's profitable. And you can see at any point of the market peaks, you could typically see where this is prime selling periods, whereas most times down here is probably more of the holding periods. So this is where it's a little bit less viable for them to run their mines. And we can see that back in this capitulation here, back after 2017. And then again, when we saw that back in March. Now, I would say that this March dip is an anomaly, but that's obvious to what has happened in the world and everything else. So I don't think that needs more explaining than what it is. Stock market went down at that same point. Markets just go down when people are overly feared. And that's a good thing to remember too, even with all these indicators and with these charts. At the end of the day, it all comes down to buyer sentiment and what the investors are thinking. So regardless of any logic, they'll capitulate based on any amount of fear. Sometimes all it takes is a president to come up and make an announcement and it's all gone. So this is where it gets interesting. We're looking at the 2020 to the current date miner overflow chart. And I remember a lot of these key points specifically because I was watching really hard these charts and understanding exactly why certain dips were happening. And we got significant selling pressures at certain points. You can see obviously crypto miners are doing their thing and selling and selling and selling until they recognize that we're in a bull market Once that happened, some of them held onto their bags, but a lot of them did have some selling pressure over in the 26,000 mark. And then again, we saw a lot of selling pressure overall around the 30 to 40,000 mark for miners. And we saw that numerously all the way up until 55K. Now I'm assuming that a lot of miners that have had weak hands are now gone. But I think ultimately what we can see from this, which is the overall downturn of the outflow. So this is the miners selling a lot less Bitcoin. This tells me that miners are, one, out of Bitcoin, which I highly doubt is the case. And that's because Bitcoin is at one of its most profitable peaks right now, especially when you have low hydro costs like China. So we see right now miners are holding on to their Bitcoin, which could be incredibly bullish, but it will lead to some resistance later on because eventually a lot of these miners are going to take profits at some point. And again, this goes with institutional money. We know a lot of institutional money has entered the space. And it's important to note that once balance sheets are up and once everyone has to redo their budgets, people are going to sell some Bitcoin and take some profit. These are going to be normal things that are going to happen, just like it's happened with gold, the United States, or any other asset class that companies can invest in and put in their treasury. So eventually we will see Bitcoin mature into a market cycle where it's more dictated by balance sheets of corporations and governments. But right now we're in a very volatile and speculative point where it really is just a few institutional investors and then a bunch of private investors like you and me. So I wanted to talk about Bitcoin and discuss where it could go if we did see a super cycle. So what a super cycle would be is an extended cycle, so much longer than what we've had. Some bullish cases to that is because we have more institutional money. We have more media pressing Bitcoin and everything else. It's on MSNBC every day now. We're all talking about Bitcoin. You know, everyone's calling you now about Bitcoin. All those people that were joking and saying, oh, how's your Bitcoin? Now they're actually calling you and saying, hey, how's your Bitcoin? Right? So the sentiment has clearly changed in the market and we recognize that. Now I want to always be able to adapt, but I still want to be cautious because some of the traps that people found back in 2017 is they were in that mindset of crypto's not going to go down, crypto's not going to go down. And a lot of them got burned because of that. They really held on to a good portion of their bags and they recognized going into this bull market that they don't want to make that same mistake again. So you do have to be cautious and there's nothing wrong with taking a little bit of profits off the table, at least making yourself so you're playing with house money. If you can at least do that, then everything else is gravy and you can YOLO the rest of your bags. But if you have things to pay off, house, anything, it wouldn't be bad of you to take some profits, even though we could potentially go into a super cycle. In terms of my personal belief, I'm not sure that we're going into a super cycle. I mean, anything is possible, but let's talk about it. So I have a couple of market indicators here to discuss previous bull markets. So I've marked up the peaks. So obviously we peaked here and we broke through that peak here to go into another bull run here. And the same thing happened here where we tested that peak and then we broke through entering into the new bull market. Now, again, I really want to be careful because a lot of my data is referencing back in 2017. And that's not to say that this is going to happen exactly like 2017. Really, all I'm doing here is looking at what happened prior and then talking about the potential outcomes that we could have. At the end of the day, nobody truly knows. And if anyone tells you that they know for certain when the crypto market cycle is going to end or what Bitcoin is going to top out at, I would probably recommend that you stop watching that person. But we peaked off at around 19.9, somewhere around there, basically the 20K mark. And then we tested that mark and then ultimately broke through it. So we've done a similar movement to the same bull markets, and it seems like we haven't really progressed as high as the other bull markets. Now, this seems pretty level in terms of where Bitcoin could top. And a lot of people are saying that Bitcoin has topped already, but I'm personally not in that camp at all. Now, a lot of people would consider a super cycle would just do a motion like this, basically go right up. Now, I'm not sure if I'm in that class of going straight up. I think it would be more likely for Bitcoin to go up a little bit and then maybe consolidate for a while and then move forward up. And remember, just go back to this line here. Every day that the crypto market is up, this line is going to increase in value as well. So the longer that Bitcoin consolidates in a straight line, the more opportunity it's going to have to really shoot up to some incredible numbers. So at this point, I'm fine with Bitcoin just trading level for a little bit, but I know that's not the reality. Bitcoin's going to have to go at some point. And we already see that altcoins are really making a move forward. In terms of the market cycle, we've talked about my predictions. Now this will look familiar to what we measured out way back in another video that we did about the crypto market cycles of where I think that we could top out at. And I did discuss that my personal price target was about 150,000. Now, of course, that price target absolutely changes the longer this bull cycle goes, because the longer the bull cycle goes, the higher that price can go. So I really believe that if we do get an extended bull market and move a lot further than the 1400 days that we've charted out from our last bull cycle, then my 150 mark is definitely out of the water. Now, a lot of people are saying that 300K is on the table, and I do think 300K could be on the table. I do think you should be cautious when people are starting to throw around numbers of saying $1 million Bitcoin this market cycle. Now, to put that in perspective, that needs to beat gold's market cap outright and almost double it. Basically, that would put Bitcoin to roughly almost $19 trillion. And the current gold market cap is roughly 11.5 trillion. So that's a lot of money to move in to Bitcoin to hit $1 million. So I'd be cautious of your expectations. But the reality is, if we go down and go back up, it's more than feasible that we could hit more like the 300K plus range, or even go a little bit higher. Now, I did talk about the tokenomics, and if we did match gold's market cap, we would bring Bitcoin to approximately $750,000. And yeah, that is still possible, but that's $11.8 trillion. So when we're talking about a super cycle, obviously our price targets are going to get blown out of the water. So again, you just need to be cautious, making sure that you're taking a little bit of profit. So if we're discussing a $300,000 Bitcoin, that brings us to a $5.6 trillion market cap, and that would bring us above that 300,000 mark. Now, is $5.6 trillion available to get into Bitcoin? Well, consider this. Apple is $1.8 trillion. If they start investing in Bitcoin, that's going to be a big deal. But we're talking about maybe billions, not trillions. I truly believe that we're going to need a flood of institutional investors to meet this price target. And also, we have the private investors. And we've shown in the recent GameStop fiasco and everything that's happened there, that individual investors actually have a lot of buying power, especially now. So is it realistic that we can hit this $5.6 trillion market cap for Bitcoin? I absolutely believe that we can do this. In fact, this kind of comes in line with my total prediction of the crypto market cap. I've said this market cycle, we could potentially see a crypto market cap peak out at roughly $10 trillion. Now, I haven't said that you could hold on to that. I've always said that we'd capitulate down. But this is the second part of the super cycle. A lot of people say that when we have a super cycle, that our downturn is going to be a lot less. So this is the part that I wanted to stress caution. As much as I think that we can and will definitely hit these levels, if we do hit these levels and you hold on to all of your bags and then we crash like other market cycles, you could be left wondering why you didn't take profit. Now, I'm not saying to sell all your bags. Far from it, especially if we are going into this very, very bullish cycle. But I am saying that you should stress caution, really pay attention to what's happening. Again, my biggest indicator is how much the market is moving on a day-to-day basis. So if we look back at 2017, you can see more often than not, when you have multiple days of massive run-ups, that's probably when you should be a little bit nervous about whether or not you should take profits. But right now, none of that is telling me that we need to take profit. All I see here is consolidation and very methodical moves. So right now, it's not at that point where I would need to stress, now's the time. Again, my biggest indicator is how volatile the whole market is entirely. If the market is showing some support, I'm going to be less worried about taking profits at these levels. So if we hit up in this 300,000 range and above, and I see that we have dramatic support there, I'm probably going to sell a lot less of my bags. And that's why I've been a big proponent of selling small amounts. I've always said I'm going to sell 1% of a position on a very common basis, and I will adjust that depending on how high we go and how uncomfortable I feel. If everything's going very parabolic very quickly in terms of gaining 30-40% in a day, I'm probably going to take profit. But if we're gaining 30-40% over the course of a week, I'm going to be a little bit less concerned, but still maybe taking a little bit off the table to at least make sure that I'm breaking even and that everything else financially is all taken care of. But I've committed to the majority of my crypto is going to run through the cycle. There are some bags that I'm going to sell more of and some bags that I'm going to sell less of. There are some bags that have committed to 60%, some bags that have committed to 30 or less. And then there are some bags that I'm going to liquidate entirely. It all depends on the market, the project, the crypto, and how I plan to structure my portfolio going into the next market cycle. In terms of the near term, obviously Bitcoin has a lot of support, and we see that by these support levels. We have 42,000 or 44,000, which is more what I think this support level should represent. And then we have another support down here, way below, around 28 to 32,000 is roughly that support level. So we have a lot of support to break through. So if we don't break through those levels of support, we should be good in terms of the whole bull market. Now, I do think if we hit over 300,000 and we take our sweet time getting there, then the drop will be dramatically less, but we'll have to decide that when it comes to it and see how much support the crypto market has. But right now, we can at least indicate these levels of support as our markers for the crypto retracement. So these are potential levels that we could land on. Now, to just present a little bit of the bear case, historically, we've done the similar motion of hitting our market peak and then capitulating down as close to the market peak as possible. So we could see something similar where we do end up capitulating down eventually close to this point. It's very possible that we capitulate down to this point. But if you're looking at probabilities, I wouldn't say so, especially again, if we have a lot of support going at these higher levels. Hopefully this video has helped in terms of identifying what would a super cycle be. Obviously, we'll be talking about the dailies a lot more once we get into the more parabolic times. We'll be doing live streams and everything else. So make sure that you're subscribing for all of that content, because we'll be watching the market and making sure that we're identifying these volatility spikes. And when it is volatile, that's when you should take a little bit off the table and be prepared to maybe re-enter the market on some dips that we do have a good level of support. Like I would argue the last dip that we just went through, there were a lot of people that capitulated, but that was prime selling periods, and I actually picked up a lot in my bags. I picked up more KSM, I picked up more DOT, I picked up more Cake, I picked up a lot of tokens in this recent capitulation, and I feel like that should be your sentiment going forward, as long as we have a good level of support where we're at. But again, if we're just going parabolic and shooting up to 300,000 on a whim, that's when you should be concerned. Hopefully that helped. Obviously, in terms of TA and everything else, I can't predict the market. Nobody can predict the market. It is basically up to human emotion at the end of the day. We may see a super cycle. I'm not super bullish on there will be a super cycle, but the possibility is always there, and I will concede that realistically we have no idea, and this bull market could be completely different than 2017 and previous bull markets. That's it for me. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and happy hodling.